we are back for another AfroTech Live. I am Will Lucas, brand manager for AfroTech. Pleased to bring you guys this live stream today. Listening for a change, transforming talk into action. This conversation focuses on the impact employees and groups like Audible's Black Employee Network have on a company, as told through the story of Audible and their mission as a company that means more than just what they produce, like great audiobooks, short stories, and podcasts. I'm personally so excited for this because I'm a big fan of Audible. Excited every month when I get that email that says my credit is ready to go. So I'm going to introduce my squad here today. I have Abby West, who's a recovering journalist, which we're going to talk about for sure, and a true pop culture junkie whose decades at prominent media organizations like Essence and Entertainment Weekly and People even developed her love for stories that explore, empower, and celebrate underrepresented communities. Abby is an editorial director at Audible and co-founded the Black Employee Network. Ara Tucker joined Audible in 2016 and is head of talent and culture. She leads an integrated group focused on attracting, hiring, developing, engaging employees at all stages of their careers and ensuring that Audible is an inclusive and progressive workspace. Shout out to Ara. And Justin Cockburn joined the company in 2018 as a software developer, primarily works on the retail website experience on Amazon.com and enjoys building an intuitive and performant storefront for Audible's customers. Then for the folks who are watching on Facebook, as we get through this conversation, we will be monitoring the chat on Facebook. So if you do have questions along the way, we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. And feel free, I cannot emphasize this enough, feel free to be selfish with your questions, be specific with your questions, because the better context you give us, the better answer you're gonna get in return. And so I want to start this off, chatting with Abby for a second, because affinity groups in so many ways, create community for employees who might perhaps under index in the workplace, right? And so can you talk a little bit about specific ways Audible's Black Employee Network provides impact towards helping these employees thrive? And what was the catalyst for this in the beginning?
Well, I came to Audible in 2017 after having been at many other companies where ethnicity-based affinity groups had existed, right? I was at Time Inc. for about 15 years. I had the Beat, I think, shout out to all the former Time Inc.ers out there. So I knew the role that could play in giving both the community, but also visibility that many of us are looking for and may not always have the straightest path to. So, when I got here, it was such a welcome and inclusive community that, we started to see that more of us were looking for that kind of community. And so last year, my co-founder, Yvonne Durant, and I co-founded the Black Employee Network. And it's really born out of that desire to find community, but also to explore the opportunity that Audible has always had. It's based around storytelling. It's based around speaking or your authentic voice. And we knew that there was an opportunity to that conversation here about showing up as your authentic self in your workspace. It just hadn't had a structure yet. So this was the opportunity that we found that could do that. And so of course the leadership was as supportive of it as we expected them to be, but they also saw the opportunity for the group to have more of an impact on the business, either through our content or through our external activations, as well as internal communities. And that has played out in so many different ways, and most relevantly in the post-George Floyd world, where we have been able to help shape our company's conversation internally and externally around how we go about the business of being humans and leaders at this time.
Justin, can you add some color to that from your experience? I think about, being a developer, you need that community around you that can support you and not just, people who probably don't look like you, don't have your same experience, come from places that you might come from. How has the employee network been impactful towards you and your career?
Absolutely, it's been pretty tremendous. So I think that essentially, like earlier on in my career, it took me a while to understand like the importance of that, and I think it's very important to have like a group that will kind of bring about conversations about the Black experience in America and the different narratives and different stories that we have. So I think having a group where we're able to get together and discuss has been huge as a developer, and just kind of allowing me to kind of go into this group and discuss different issues and then come back and then be part of the entire company and have that sense of inclusiveness. And it also helps build that the culture where you can feel comfortable no matter like what your background is. So I think it's been very impactful.
You know, Abby, sometimes when you're creating these groups, you know, it can have the alternative effect of being isolating, right? That's them over there, right? That's the Black group, right?
Yeah.
And it may be harder to feel incorporated into the larger company narrative. And what successes or obstacles, you know, can you speak to that you've, you know, helped foster with the Black, you know, employee network, and how has this group been embraced by the company at large and leadership specifically?
I mean, I think that's when you're speaking to the success of Ben so far to date. Again, it was just like a year and a half, barely a year and a half old, and I think Justin, you really expressed how impactful it can be within our community. It's been impactful because it has been embraced by not just us, right? We show up, but our allies, our non-Black and Brown employees show up as well. They show up for all of our events. They show up for our conversations, the hard conversations, the tough conversations, and they join us in an expectation of, you know, communal moving forward. So it's successful because of the larger community. It's successful because the leadership embraces the expectation of this larger community, because it can't exist in a vacuum. It can't just be us having conversations on our own or saying this would be great, we should move forward in this way, and then no one following through on that. So this is the only way it can be successful. And to be honest, the major hurdles is time. It's time, because we're all doing our day jobs. We're all trying to do more because we believe in these things so dearly. And there are folks whose day jobs it is who are also putting in all that work. And so we're all trying to show up and meet at the right place.
You know, I think Newark, the city, is just as important to this conversation as anything, right? And I got familiar with Newark by watching Cory Booker's rise. You know, I didn't know much about Newark, you know, pre Cory Booker, and you know, so I know little other than that, other and the fact that, you know, it's like 50% Black, so which I think is like incredible. Particularly when you think about communities that are working to rebuild, how is Audible and Ben, the Black Employee Network, and your connections to the city? How do they work to inspire the spirit of entrepreneurship in Newark and their potential success?
Yeah, so that's a really big and fun question to answer. So my parents actually grew up in Newark, so it's really kind of fun for me, full circle, talking about stories, to come back to a city which basically launched me. You know, we have multiple things that we're doing. You know, we think about how do we drive economic growth in Newark, you know, by hiring local talent, encouraging employees to actually live local and buy local. So we provide a $500 a month stipend for anybody who wants to live in Newark. And then when we were in the office, we actually incentivized employees to lunch out on Wednesdays at our local restaurants. You know, job seekers, that's really important. So we are also working with Newark organizations to source talent. I think based on our last economic impact report, it was about 1 in 4 of our customer care employees are actually hired from community organizations in Newark. You know, education's another area where we're focused. You know, since 2007, when we actually moved our headquarters into the city of Newark. So this is a long tail story. We've had an immersive high school internship program. So essentially we partner with 2 high schools in the city, give high school juniors an opportunity to come in and do workplace immersion, basically working side by side with folks like Abby and Justin and all folks around the globe right now, because we just wrapped our summer internship, which was 100% virtual. But really thinking about how do we help those folks get a leg up and really support them, not only that junior year, but through the end of high school into college, where we welcome them to come back, you know, with their local or during the summer, but also paying them a stipend to help them through school. And then some have actually joined as full-time employees, which is really fun to see. Nicole Ransom's actually one who's in the content organization. Go Nicole. But, you know, we also just recently announced, if anybody's paying attention to the news, you know, the creation of a global center for urban development. And what that's going to do is expand some of those efforts that I've talked about, but also some new ones. So watch this space, thinking about how do we do community and economic initiatives while launching new and measurable models that focus on advancing equality, racial justice, and economic empowerment. While it's based in Newark, we're hoping that it can be a model for other cities across the world. And, our founder and executive chairman, Don Katz, who's super passionate about this and kind of guides all of us, is really the one who's going to oversee this effort. So you can be sure that the commitment's going to remain, central to all that we do as we evolve.
Yeah, I kind of want to back up a little bit because I read your bios and I read them aloud here. I obviously read them on my own previous to this conversation, but I really want to kind of dig into who you guys are, if we can, for a minute. So, like when I think about our conversations with younger people, and it's a lot about, we as Black people over-index on using technologies. We spend a lot of our days on these things, and too often we are consumers of it and don't realize that there are people on the other side building these things. And so if I could, I'm going to start with you, Abby, because, when we'll say you're an editorial director at Audible, like, what does that mean? Like, what does your days look like? Like, what do you spend your time doing?
Yeah, in my role, I tend to touch a lot of different parts of our content. There's a lot of the content about content and how we talk to. I'm in charge of our editorial interviews and video strategy. So a lot of the interviews you'll see that are on the site, I'm helping to set up, create, structure, and shape, as well as our videos that are editorial based and questions and answers, and sharing more of this amazing content, but also touching how we develop what we're developing, because there's a lot of original content coming out of Audible that is just kind of amazing, that really speaks to our world. So my day-to-day can be anything from just doing interviews with folks like Tayari Jones, who, shout out to her, Half Light, which is amazing, to sitting in a number of meetings. So I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of meetings. Let's just say that.
And Justin, I want to hear your story. Like, did you know like early, like you wanted to be in software development? What was your trajectory like? And were you self-taught? Did you learn in school? How did that go for you?
Yeah, I knew pretty early on. Well, both my parents are in STEM careers, so I was always looking at a bunch of stuff in that direction. But the reason that I kind of more zeroed in on computer science and programming is that it just gives you the flexibility. You can go into many, many different areas with it. There is, medicine, there's finance, there's entertainment, like applications for computer science. So that's something that I had kind of done some programming in high school, and I figured, I can kind of use this and build things on my own with it. So that's kind of what really motivated me to stick with it and to go and pursue it as a career choice.
What was the first thing you built?
First thing I built, going way back, probably was a pattern game where you write a series of for loops in order to generate these sort of patterns it was in Visual Basic, and you basically are making these patterns using for loops. So that was probably the first thing I ever worked on. Yeah. It was definitely exhilarating once I got things to work right.
For sure. And I think about, the type of work that you do, that, being in talent and culture, because like you're the inroads for us to get into these technology companies. And if we don't have people that look like you, look like us, and have your backgrounds, your perspectives, then, it's a lot more challenging to get somebody who doesn't see me where I am to recruit me to a company. So talk a little bit about the narrative around how you can inspire or attract Black talent, or not even more just Black talent, the other characteristics that we come with. Talk about that a little bit if you could.
Yeah, no. So my brother-in-law is in the tech space, and he came back last year like, oh my God, AfroTech is amazing. You've got to get with that. I'm like, okay. So I'm excited to talk about this. But, I think what I like that Justin and Abby have probably made clear to all of you, at Audible, you get to be a person first, really discover whatever your identity is, tell your authentic story. And our scale allows us to design programs and initiatives where people actually get to bring their highest and best contributions. I think a lot about my role in this space because, not only do I lead recruiting, performance, learning, executive leadership, employee experience, spectrum and belonging, which is what we call diversity and inclusion 2.0. I also sit on our CEO's direct leadership team. And so, for me, it's one of these where I've obviously been a Black person in a lot of different industries. I was a recovering attorney, and I have parents who are Black in corporate America. But, I have a lot more things that I bring into the world when I'm in a room. And so even as I was thinking about this conversation, like one of the things I did want to sort of share with the audience was, yes, I wear that experience, but my experience has been personal, and I love having colleagues like Abby and Justin and folks in Ben and outside of Ben helping to challenge those assumptions about what we need to do. My role, my team knows we focus on structures and people. You can't just change hearts and minds if you're not willing to challenge the processes, the systems, the assumptions, the traditions that you have. And so that's the work. And I'm really excited to be doing it. And I'm really, humbled to know that it does make a difference to have people who look different and have different perspectives sort of running a company and lending their voice.
Yeah, I love that because, we have these conversations, specifically talking to people who are in recruiting and et cetera. Like we're not monolithic people. Like we're not, just because we're Black doesn't mean we're going to connect. Right. And I think it is important to shine a light on those other things and find common ground across the board. And not to say that a white person couldn't recruit, me or you, but the idea is to find common ground and find, a shared vision of what the future may look like. And so I'll point this to Justin first. And, we're always trying to shine a light on Black technologists and enthusiasts. From your experience, if you could find, like, what's the best sales pitch you found for getting people to see tech as an opportunity for them? Like, what challenges do you uniquely face, or we uniquely face as people, that says, tech's not for you, but you've obviously found that it was for you? Like, what's that sales pitch that you can deliver?
Well, I'd say that, the key sales pitch, I think, is just the flexibility that programming offers you. You don't need to have a ton of money or a ton of resources to get started working on your own app. You don't need to have, a factory to start building something. You have everything right in front of you. You have a computer, and you can buy a cheap Raspberry Pi and then start playing around with little different applications and start learning how to write in like different languages. Like Python is a good starter language, and it's easy to get going. And I think the bar to entry is lower than a lot of other like STEM fields. So I think that's, like, for me, that's a huge selling point. You could actually just try it and see if you like it, and see if you get that rush when you get to build something or get something to work or fix a bug. So I think it's just kind of, it's a very open and like more there certainly are barriers to starting maybe startups and stuff like that. However, in order to get into it and see if you have interest into it and to get your idea out there, I think that it's a little bit easier. For as long as you have like a computer or some sort of technology, you can kind of build on top of it.
I want to remind the folks watching on Facebook, we do have the option for you guys to go ahead and drop comments and questions in the chat. We do have producers monitoring that. So we want to make sure you guys are engaged and, that we deliver you what you need. So feel free to ask your questions there, and we'll get to as many of them as possible throughout the length of this conversation. All right. I'd like you to comment on that, because, again, to my earlier point, like, seeing tech as an opportunity isn't always like a first thought to us. Like, what, in your perspective, is a, number one, valid but effective, way to present careers like this as an opportunity, especially when you talk about communities like Newark, where, again, rebuilding 50% Black, they're not seeing themselves, in technologists walking down the street, right? And so, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, so I'll pivot outside and then talk about inside. We are focused on lots of parts of the Newark ecosystem, including the innovation economy. And so Newark Venture Partners is actually a venture fund and accelerator designed to attract early stage companies to Newark. And, Don, our founder, had a big part in that too. But I would say that, of NVP and its portfolio companies, 55% of which have a female founder or a founder of color. So these are folks who are in Newark, creating jobs, creating revenue, hiring people, and opening up opportunities. I actually read a stat on our impact report, but that we're helping drive growth of Newark's innovation economy at a rate that's on par or even above other emerging tech hubs. So Jersey City, Brooklyn, which is where I'm coming from today, and Washington, D.C. So I think there's a real opportunity here to sort of see Newark in a new way And then also to give our employees, Justin was talking about the sales pitch. Like one of the things I think is cool is that we get to give of our time and our expertise. We're not a company that's about check writing for check writing's sake. It's about like put your resources and your talent and your gifts to work. And so a number of our employees get to partner with these companies as specialists and say, like I've got HR background, so I can give you, information on employee number 2 that you hire. Or Justin could talk about how do you actually find the right people when you're ready to open the garage, so to speak. Abby can talk about how do you tell a story that like people wants to talk about, not just Wired. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then also, we are thinking about the experience. While I talked about all of us have individual experiences, I acknowledge that there are some things that unfortunately are still somewhat consistent. And so we rely on, research organizations like Coquel, which used to be Center for Talent Innovation. They recently did a study about the experience of Black professionals, including entrepreneurship in tech. So we're using that knowledge to inform our efforts in tech, product, UX, to think about how do we not only increase representation, but then how do we create those career opportunities and pathways so people can actually move through the organization and or, go off to found a tech company and come back to Newark, and then we can continue the cycle again.
For sure. Yeah. All right, and continuing with you, are like, there's this quote, people don't know how much, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And
yep.
Can you speak about the more of the work that Audible is doing in the community that may not just be trying to get more revenue to the bottom line, but actually impact people's lives?
Yeah, and I think, Abby talked about us meaning more than what we do as a company. Like that's something very deeply felt for us. We have people principles that are publicly available, so I encourage people to check them out. But as part of Activate Caring, we are looking at how do we improve lives in the cities and the countries we operate in, and how do we exemplify that? How do we give people a chance? And so I think, this mission-driven spirit and purpose is something that's been with us. But I think with COVID-19, I talked about the virtual internship program. When companies were saying we can't do this right now, Audible said we can and we will do as many internships as we need to make sure all of our students have a place. We also thought about, I talked about Lunch at Wednesday, right? So restaurants, entrepreneurship, small business owners, a lot of them African-American in Newark, they were in a really tough spot. And so we mobilized and started Newark Working Kitchens, which essentially activates local restaurants, and they cook nutritious meals, for Newark's residents as well as the frontline workers. And it also keeps the restaurants open and jobs going. And so far I can report we've activated 25 restaurants and served over 460,000 meals in just, 20 plus weeks. So, it's, as this, COVID is more than a public health crisis, right? It's an economic crisis. And so we need to figure out ways to keep it going. We've got independent restaurants in it. We've got to create, jobs so that we don't have empty storefronts. So it's really this flywheel, and every dollar that we give to NWK is really about sustaining the restaurants and the community members who give so much to us, right? As Audible employees, when we're there, there's a real connection to the city. And so it's hard not to be there, but it's great to know that there are ways that we can be there for the city that has been there for us.
Yeah, for a place that has 50% Black people, I bet there are some bomb restaurants.
So good.
So many.
Right. Abby, can you chime in on there also, the work that you guys do in the community and just to make an impact and a direct connection to people and helping them, maintain and sustain good lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the things that I really loved about Audible when I got here. Just the idea that as a tech company, as a creative company, we weren't expecting people to just drop into Newark, then go back to your homes. Even if you didn't live in Newark proper, you had an opportunity to engage with the community in many different ways. And that Activate Caring that Ara talked about is something all of us engage in. Every single employee takes an opportunity of their workday, very well encouraged to go out into some structured opportunities within school systems, working with NWK and the Newark Venture Partnerships. It's something we all sort of cherish as an opportunity outside of our day-to-day jobs, and it furthers our connection to our local community. When we all went home, I can't tell you how many people were checking to make sure that our staff, our food staff at the office were still good and taken care of. I was personally worried about the guy at our parking lot and making sure he was good. And we all make sure that the folks in our community are taken care of in different ways.
Yeah, I think about, I would imagine somebody in the company thinks of it this way, but for me personally, what Audible does, it's kind of like you democratize books in a way. It's like a service because, number one, you have different ways people process information, and being able to just like read a book through is not always like the way people learn and digest information. But also for, people like me, being on the go from the moment I wake up to the moment I sit down, it's something I can do while I'm driving. It's something I can do while I'm on, traveling or whatever. And I don't have to be, stationary trying to, get a fiction in or get a nonfiction in or et cetera. So, Justin, when you think about more ways from the developer's perspective that you guys reach out to community, what would you say to that?
Well, I think as like developers, like we have responsibility to make sure that the content is getting to the customer, and that we are having like the stories that are relevant to like Black people in tech are getting out there. So in terms of tech, sometimes there is some separation between like the content itself and how we're delivering it. However, I think that our intention is to make sure that we're doing the most efficient work in getting that information and getting our customers all the different offers. But I think Audible as a whole has a definitely plays a pretty important role in kind of sharing different Black stories. For example, the Malcolm X autobiography that was released recently is just hearing it and having it read. It just adds so much more impact to the incredible story that was Malcolm X's life. I think Audible plays a major role there.
Yeah, and there's a comment that came in Facebook, not a question, but it is a comment. Even though about the impact that groups like BEN has sparked within Audible, it's always amazing to hear more about it to reinvigorate that caring spirit. Amazing. Yeah, keep your comments and questions coming in on Facebook, and if you do have questions for either of these guys, Ara is a hiring manager, so if you're looking for a gig, we got your plug right here. So. All right, if you think about responsibility and social responsibility to support Black tech employees and entrepreneurs, what would Audible's message be to that respect? What is their responsibility to Black employees and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think on the entrepreneurial side, we talked a little bit about New York Working Kitchens and MVP. So Abby talked about George Floyd. It was a busy summer for a lot of us, right? And a hard summer and a really painful one. But I think it also allowed us to articulate a lot of the things that we might have intuited about Audible and put them out into the world. So for instance, in June, we actually released a statement on our website, and it's titled "On Racism and Justice, Contemplations and Action." And, while Don, our founder, who's a writer, he took the lead, but he really, I think, respectfully approached myself and Abby and Yvonne, Abby's co-chair, and really sought out our input because, he acknowledged that he did not walk in our shoes every day and wanted to make sure we really got this right for Black employees, but for all of us to understand our role. So, Audible, I think Justin alluded, we have so many great narrators, so many great emerging playwrights. Abby's going to talk a little bit about all of those, so many creators who work with us. And we have for a number of years, the, professional creative class has been part of our DNA. Ralph Ellison, inspired Don as a mentor back when he was at NYU. So we've had that. But to your point around tech, we get it. We've got to double down. We've got to continuously attract and develop Black talent at all levels. And so as a follow-up to that statement, Don also made it really clear at a global all hands that we are all deputized to make this aspiration real. We are all, if Rolodexes are still a thing, all have to open up our contacts, find that talent, source that talent, and attract it, and then develop it. And I think that, Justin can keep me honest, but I do think that our tech product and UX organization, from leadership to the tech allyship committee to all sorts of, employees across the globe, they've taken it seriously, and we now have a blueprint for action that we can all plug into. But it's not, Ben's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. And I think that's some of the work Abby talked about, is that there is a lot of emotional and actual labor being done, but it's not being done just by us, for us. It's being done with us and to the benefit of all of us.
All right, great. I mean, great alley-oop there. So I'm going to take the bait and plug this for Abby. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about how Black creators plug into Audible and recognize, platforms designed to help them thrive?
I mean, it comes in so many different ways. First of all, we take the lead in elevating those voices, right? They either exist already in terms of the existing stories that are out there, the audiobooks, the audio experiences, and we've elevated both the creators, and we have pages across the site, across our app, in our social feeds. We're making sure that their work is being seen and elevated, and we're reaching out more and more to new and different creators to work on originals, to bring works that did not previously exist in audio, like the Malcolm X autobiography, into audio, to make it, as you mentioned, democratizing it, making it available and accessible to anyone in a much more intimate way. When you're listening to Lawrence Fishburne performing Malcolm X's words, that hits different. It just does. And that is just one of the ways that we know the conversation has to happen, and we can reach out and give many different creatives an opportunity to share a different work, not telling different kinds of stories, not following any prescribed narrative for what Black people are. You and I have talked about, like, we show up in different ways with different lived experiences. We need to be able to show those in our storytelling.
If you can talk a little bit about when you're looking to recruit, obviously just qualified candidates across the board, but specifically when you're looking to recruit Black candidates, or you find a Black candidate and I want to get this person in my pipeline. Talk to me about that recruiting journey and what may be different or unique about what we need to hear from a recruiter versus, someone else. And additionally, when you're trying to build up a population of folks who could be recruited later, like in a city like in Newark and et cetera, what has to happen along that journey to make sure that the pipeline is full?
Yeah, so I mean, I hope Abby and Justin will again say whether or not this is the truth. But for me as a Black candidate, right, like the things I looked for and the reason I joined Audible was the scale and the accessibility, right? Like, our leaders are incredibly accessible. People reach across difference, whatever that is, to get the best ideas. You can make a difference. So all of those things, I think you have to have like some foundational things as a company that are authentic and are continuously amplified. Abby talked about social. Like, I take to LinkedIn regularly because I want people to hear my actual voice, not just, see me on the website. And I think a lot of us tell our stories on social media. So that's like one. If you're a candidate, if our story resonates or you want to add to it, like, reach out, let us know. But we're also proactively seeking people out. We're going to AfroTech later this fall, so we're excited. We pair with Grace Hopper, Pursuit, Resilient Coders. We go to Lesbians Who Tech, so we're trying to be in the spaces where people are. And really, what differentiates us, I think Ben has provided us, along with our other impact groups, a real way in. So my head of TA, talent acquisition, she and her team have committed. They are putting people, embedding them into the impact groups in a very intentional way of saying, we are going to come to you. We are going to learn about you. We're going to talk to you. We're going to figure out like what's on your mind, not just where we should refer talent or get talent, but really like, what's our proposition? Like, are we going out into the market and saying the right things? Could we be saying things differently, better? So, it's not just about the numbers for us. It really is, it's that culture add. And I think anybody who's listening, please look for being additive. Don't worry about fitting into something, because that's a finite space. And I like to think that all of us have an opportunity to lead with abundance and to step in with abundance and know that when we walk in a door, we add to an organization. And so for me, that's been the thing that's not only got me to Audible, but kept me and really, I hope, inspires other employees. And as we do the work of bringing people in, developing them, having honest conversations with managers about what people need, what they want to do, and how that fits into our business, we're a lot more transparent about our business model and what we're trying to seek and do in the world, not just from a mission-driven standpoint. So I think all of that, and then the work Ben has done in terms of safe space, holding space for employees to really say, you know what, like, it's okay if you're not okay, because we bring the whole thing into work. And if people feel like they have to be exceptional or okay all of the time, then we're going to have the revolving door of people who come in, wash out, come in, wash out. We're not looking for that. Let's get the numbers for right now. We're looking for like, let's get the numbers for the long term and the stories behind those numbers.
Yeah. So for the folks who are already inside the system, you know, like let's take a Justin, you know, like how are people like him or others obviously supported throughout their career at an Audible to make sure that they're seeing that progression?
Yeah, so we actually a few years ago launched what we call Your Career Journey plus Audible, because we acknowledge that, you know, you own your career journey, but you don't do it by yourself. Wherever you are, you're getting help from somewhere. Hopefully, we can be a place where you seek help and not feeling like you have to go outside. But one of the things we talk about are there are different stages along the way. You know, whether you're launching at the beginning, you're growing, you're broadening, you're shifting to somewhere else in the org, or you're advancing. We don't want promotion to be seen as the only way to progress in your career. And so providing tools like a career journey plan, and I know in tech, they actually all, I think, Justin, have to do one and really have conversations with their managers and actually equipping our managers, because you're not just born a great manager, and I'm working at it every day, right? So being much more transparent about the journey a manager goes on to become effective. We've had topics, we call it Together Tuesdays, 25-minute brief sessions, just learning bites. Like, why can't we talk about race at work? Like, what gets in the way of that? How do we break the silence? What might somebody be going through if they're not telling me? And how do I build that trust? So we're really on a lot of different dimensions looking at how do we support people and know what they want to do? How do we look at our performance processes and our promotion processes to ensure that we're actually being inclusive and disrupting bias in the system? But then also equipping folks and just telling stories, right? Like a big part of Career Journey are different videos of different employees around the globe who have had different pathways to create transparency. You know, like, how do I get from point A to point Z? And, you know, I think all of that accrues and we're always iterating. So we never think we're done in talent and culture, because our culture is evolving and this virtual space is teaching us lots of new ways about connection and belonging and inclusion. So that's what gets me up every day. I know I'm going on, but I love the work and I think it's important. So
Yeah, there is a question that came in via Facebook and says, what have been some challenges in implementing some of the great programs mentioned at Audible? How is Audible's approach to these challenges different than others? I'll give this to Abby.
You know, it seems Pollyannish to just keep going back to the time, but the time is important as a base, the time to be able to do and implement the things that we need to do, because there's so many business objectives, right? There are the day-to-day business objectives. There are things that everyone wants to have an input on, and then just finding the time to align and finding the time to make sure that we're all working lockstep in the same goal. And I think that where we've been really successful is in taking a step back and all going, okay, we need to carve out that time. We need to be able to get together in the virtual room and, you know, sometimes have a hard conversation, sometimes make sure that where have we either come off the tracks with each other and come back on and say, okay, you know, we are still working towards this goal. This is a different way to do it. You know, just finding new paths and being understanding that, especially in this space where we're all dealing with external challenges that go beyond our normal, understanding that we can meet each other and show up in a better way if we just take a bit more time. So that's for me the biggest challenge, that challenge and opportunity.
Oh, really good. I kind of want to take a mini segue, because this book, Malcolm X, being narrated by Lawrence Fishburne, is such an amazing thing. And Justin, I'll throw this at you first. Like, tell me about your thoughts on raising up representative voices as it relates to the release of this autobiography.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to have that, like stories that may have been that some people who are interested in the subject might know about. I think when we introduce it into different mediums and introduce it like to our customers, for example, I think that it gives us more of a I guess a springboard to bring it to more ears and have more people who wouldn't ordinarily listen to those stories, learn about those stories. I definitely had that experience myself when I was like starting to listening to books that were recommended as Black voices, on like the Audible website. So one was the Barracoon, which is talking about the last Black cargo, like some of the last slaves that were taken from Africa into the Americas, and hearing the experiences and learning stuff that I didn't know about, even though I took different studies of African studies in college and learning new stuff. So I think just having it surfaced in this way has definitely kind of been like pretty important for spreading that information and having those voices be heard.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And you just gave me an idea. I cannot let you guys leave without getting book recommendations. Like what, like, so we have like 19 minutes or so left. And you just mentioned Barracoon. I just finished The Color of Money. So talk to me, Abby, let's do you next. Like I need some book recommendations.
Well, I will say that I'm really happy to see that Justin mentioned the Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston, which was, I mean, when that came out, I was so excited because, it's Zora Neale Hurston and any found work from her is amazing. And I'm going to be a little selfish and point out some Audible titles because I think they're pretty fantastic. I'm going to go back to Tayari Jones' Half-Light, which is kind of, it's a novella, and what I love about it is that it's drama without trauma, right? And we can do Black drama without it being traumatic. It can be the things that people think of as normal. There's also In Love and Struggle, which I think some folks might have been able to have seen back when we did actual live shows at our Bonetta Theater, which was, and it was amazing. And it's a compendium of voices that really bring a number of our kind of Black female stories, particularly to light. There was Proof of Love by Chisa Hutchinson, which is also something I think you should all check out. And I'm trying to think of something that's a little, what did you say was the last one you just listened to?
Oh, The Color of Money.
Color of Money. Okay. I'm going to come back with something that's just a little tailor-made for you.
Perfect. Because I'm gonna go to R and then we can come back. Hopefully you have it by then. But we got time, so I'm not gonna let you leave without getting it. So let's go, R.
Yeah, I think I can't wait. I haven't listened yet, but Common are part of our Words and Music series. So Butterfly Memories. I can't wait to listen to that. Evil Eye. Actually, so I like multicast, sort of almost like the audio drama. So Evil Eye. And then, just in my role, I think the first title I listened to on the train from Brooklyn to Newark, starting at Audible, was Let My People Go Surfing. So about Patagonia, and I think it's always interesting to learn from other companies that share a mission-driven purpose. So my tastes are eclectic.
Love it. You ready, Abby, or you need more time?
Well, I'm going to go with this. It's a little bit off kilter, but I think Tom Morello's Speaking Truth to Power is something that you would really be into. So I'm going to go with that one.
Speaking Truth. I'm taking notes here.
The full title is Speaking Truth to Power through stories and song by Tom Morello. Stories,
songs. Got it. Yeah, if somebody can put the links to these in Facebook so the whole audience can see this stuff. If we need to repeat anything, just let me know, and we'll do that before we get out of here. Abby, you talked about this a little, and I kind of wanted, it sparked my interest when you said it, but what's going on in the world today and Audible's response internally and externally to that. So can you talk a little bit about the conversations leadership may be having internally? Give us a kind of a sneak peek into what's happening in the world in Audible as it relates to racial injustice and the uprisings and the pandemic and all these things with regards to our plight.
Well, I think a lot of what Ara spoke about in terms of our activations really feed into this, but the week George Floyd was murdered was so heavy. And again, we were all home. We were all feeling like we were dealing with it in isolation, but yet showing up on our Zooms, putting on our best face and doing our work and trying to pretend it wasn't happening, or that we weren't as affected as we were. And, that didn't last more than a couple of days. The very first Friday, we had our first call where a number of us got together, and it was like an open to everyone, and then built over the next week, where they ended up being town halls where everyone from our CEO and founder were there and listening as we all shared what we were feeling and why, and then the expectation. So there was that period of informed listening and active listening, authentic listening, and sharing. But then the next period moved very quickly into, so what do we do with that? How do we show up in the world and be the change we want to see, essentially? The leadership gave, and particularly Don, our founder, empowered Ben to help direct money to different causes, from voter registration to bailout programs, to different ways that the Equal Justice Initiative, to show that this is more than just the storytelling. The storytelling is important. The tech side is important. How we show up in the world is also equally important. So that activation has continued. It's been more than just writing a check and doing that. We've partnered with Project Ready in Newark to extend different conversations around voter registration. Is an active participation, is that it led, to Don's talking about the democratization of, to everyone being empowered to fulfill this role and have more diversity in our staffing. And that expectation really is real. We have continual conversations about it, that it's not just conversations like, okay, now where are we? And now what are we doing next? And what can I do? And what can you do? And how do we all show up? So it continues in many different ways and experiences for everyone. But the fact is that it is not buried. The main thing that leadership has done is made it clear that there is an expectation that we all acknowledge this is going on, and that we can continue to expect more from each other.
Ara, can you speak to that also?
Yeah, I think that our founder, we've talked a lot about him, but I also want to make sure we talk about our CEO, Bob Carrigan. Abby mentioned that those sort of town halls and all of his directs, really from our CFO, our CPO, our head of tech, like all of them really show up in ways, I think, that empower folks and also make them feel like they are safe, in that they know when to speak. And as Abby said, they also know how to actively listen and then hold us accountable. So I can say with certainty, because I sit in every Bob's Direct leadership team meeting every week, that not a minute goes by where we're not thinking about inspecting what we expect and really getting better at reporting out back to our employees and being transparent. We just had a global all hands, and I was on the agenda. I was on the agenda in June. I think that, our employees are really holding us accountable, not only, as Abby said, to kind of talk about these things, but to really think about not only what do we do, but how do we do it differently? Because honestly, the same old thing is not working. So we're really also having some courageous conversations about what if we did it a little differently? And it may not happen at the speed that feels great, right? Like urgency and outcomes don't always get paired. Like we have a sense of urgency, but it's going to take a little bit of time to see. And I think we're heading in the right direction. We're seeing a lot thanks to the work of Justin, Abby, everybody that we've talked about on down. It's hard though. And I think what I appreciate is that the leadership team is curious. They want to do the work, they want to understand, but they don't necessarily need me to teach them, right? Like they're listening to the titles, they're sharing titles. It's like, that's not always the case. And so I think that's one of the other special things, is that I could be out tomorrow and not in an all hands. And I can assure you that each direct would have some authentic connection to how we're trying to move this mission forward and how we're actually operating in a real world with real people, with real pain and real opportunity.
Ara, can you speak to how actions leadership is taken to, fulfill the mission of supporting the talent, the Black talent inside of Audible?
Yeah, I mean, so my role, talent and culture is not sort of by accident or just like a nice branding thing. It's really thinking about the end-to-end employee journey and knowing that you've got to get your attraction strategies aligned with your performance strategies. You have to know the people you're coming in, how will you support them to be successful? You've got to understand, what does leadership look like, and what are the capabilities of leaders, no matter what they look like? What do they need to do to be effective in terms of this cross-cultural African diaspora, name any other diaspora? Like, there are so many complexities in our world today, and it's getting smaller and larger at the same time. So we're really looking at that end to end. And then we're also, like I said, at different touch points, whether it's when you onboard, whether it's when you become a manager, whether it's when you get promoted, like thinking about what next, like what bar has to be raised in order to do this even better. So we're doing that. And then impact groups, it's really intentional that they're called impact groups. We want to make sure that we're mobilizing and harnessing our employees to be the change we want to see, because it's not HR people in places who can do this alone. It's not the CEO or the founder, it's everybody. And so we have to figure out ways to reach across and figure out how to bridge some of those gaps that may sometimes exist in perceptions between where you sit in an organization or what you look like in an organization. So really focusing on that belonging piece just as much as the spectrum piece, which has to do with representation.
Yeah, Justin, developers aren't traditionally waving the flag for things, but maybe more stereotypically like working in isolation, and can you talk about, the communities of people that you get to work with, and do you see yourself in the coding teams? And if not, then how do you show up to, speak up and get that courage to speak up? Talk to me about your journey a little bit inside Audible.
Right. So I think a lot of times there is definitely, for me, like hesitancy to always talk about certain issues, like when there are crazy racial, almost like terroristic events that are going on. You're tempted to keep quiet when you're in a place where people aren't discussing it. And I think that just in my experience at Audible, because there's this conversation going on, you feel more comfortable in talking about and discussing about these sort of issues. There's less of a fear of being like typecasted. You're afraid that I don't want to make too much complaints about this sort of issue because that's going to be what everyone sees me as. So I think here, like when you have a company where there's this like open conversation, I think that it's something that keeps makes it comfortable for me to participate within the group as a whole. In terms of like seeing myself in the company and seeing more representation within the company, I definitely think that there's still a lot of work to go. I think there's always still always a need to have more of this inclusiveness. I think that I don't feel that, like personally, I don't feel that I've like been I feel like I've been included within my team and been able to work within my team. However, I do think that there's still, especially a lot of places in tech, there's like still like a lack of representation within the tech org and within tech orgs themselves. But I think that is improving. I think, and you can see that in like especially when you have like in organizations within your company that have like organizations where we can like bring people from different parts of the organization. You can see that more, and that helps build that sense of community within companies. But once again, there's still like there's always room for improvement and more that can be done.
You see us at AfroTech too. So I mean, we out here. So yeah,
we'll be there.
Talk to. Yes, I can't wait to see you guys there. Justin, what's a day like for you? Because I mentioned like in my previous question, like, it's like stereotypically you work in isolation, you stare at a computer all like, what is a day like for you in real life though?
It's not really too isolated. I think there's a lot of like cross-team communication. I mean, tech as like on its own, it does take some sitting down work where you're on your own, working on a lot of projects on your own. But I think maybe I'd say 20% of the day is usually spent in meetings, learning about other team systems and learning how to integrate with those teams and learning like the different dependencies that you might need in order to complete your task. And then sitting down and getting to work, like in a lot of large companies, a lot of Java and a lot of like kind of Spring frameworks where you're working on any sort of thing with a web page, like JSP, JavaScript. So like that's usually the stack I usually work with. So a lot of time you get features, especially at an individual contributor level, and as a kind of a junior or entry level SDE, a lot of stuff will be smaller tasks, fix this widget or add this feature onto a page and work on a particular thing siloed, and then kind of either deliver it or work with other teams in order to kind of pull information from another service and implement it that way. So it's a lot of, I'd say there's it's not too siloed. There's a lot of communication and soft skills that get involved with computer science or within the software development role, but I think there's a nice balance, and there's times where you get to work on your own and just kind of figure things out, which I always enjoy because that's where you get to kind of learn the most. And
what's the first thing you worked on that shipped that's actually live that we can see?
Let's see. I think it probably would be most of the first stuff I was working on was the interstitial on our Kindle Fire application that we have at Audible. But we've since moved to like a different framework for that. So I guess the next other thing you could see is the buy box itself, like the different offers that you see in the buy box on the Amazon retail website. So that's something I've worked on.
Nice. Very good. I kind of want to, in the last few minutes we have left, we did get a request to re-mention some of those books. So we'll end re-mentioning the books that you guys had already positioned. But I'm going to start with Abby here. It's like, can you take some time to speak about Audible's responsibility as a gatekeeper in a large way to, the creative community? Like how do you guys feel that responsibility day in, day out?
It weighs heavily. I'll tell you that. It weighs heavily for everyone. Definitely on our content team, the editors who are out there making deals, who are developing stories with creators, they know the importance of telling the spectrum and breadth of our stories. They understand that it is not, as you mentioned before, we're not a monolith. There's not one way to tell our story or anyone's, any ethnicity, any background, because we all show up with so many different things. So, the autobiography of Malcolm X shows up. We found it really important to bring that to the audio space the same way we did with the Radical King. There is more than one way to tell our story. There is a continuing effort to reach out to creatives, to elevate their stories, to make sure that we're gut checking, that we're asking enough questions, that is, who's in the room and who's having the conversations. There's an understanding that it is influenced in so many different ways, and that we have to continue to do the work of making sure that we show up, ask the right questions, reach out to the right creatives. And when I say the right creatives, that means more than you think, that means more than you expected, that we show up having different backgrounds, alternative backgrounds to what is expected even, and over deliver by telling a story that you didn't know you needed, that it was something like that. So I think it's an awesome responsibility that Audible takes really seriously, and know that the people within Audible take it really seriously from the content side particularly, but also throughout. Everyone feels connected to what we put out into the world. So the gatekeeper role sounds so foreboding, but it's something, I'm a nerd at heart, with great power comes great responsibility, where we take that on seriously.
Can you speak to some innovative ways that you guys have thought up ideas to amplify Black voices that, are live today?
Well, if you can, I think we'll drop the link into something here. Was Raising Up Black Voices page that we have that breaks it down into many different ways that you can find the genre, and from horror to whatnot, where you can find different creators for the thing that you're interested in, because maybe you're not just interested in the Black identity story. You're interested in something that also just happens to be brought to you by a Black creative. And that is part of the democratization that we're really invested in. It's not just telling our story. we tell stories, and that is inflected by identity in many different ways, and that's what we bring to you. So there's definitely that. We've had telling our own stories where we actually inflected it with folks who live in Newark and our employees who talk about their story, the listens that really impacted them, especially in this moment. And we'll add those links as well. We find the ways to do the work internally and then bring them out and amplify them within on social media, or with influencers. The same as with when we were talking about the autobiography of Malcolm X. We had Brittany Packett talking with Ilyasa Shabazz, about whose memoir Growing Up X is also on Audible now in audio for the first time, talking there. So this is another extension for folks who may not be familiar. They're not necessarily within our space, and they're like, oh, this is something I didn't know existed in terms of the storytelling, and there's more of it to happen. So we find the ways.
And real quickly, because we did have people ask about the books you guys recommended. If you remember, Justin, can you start with the books you recommended so they can drop those links in Facebook?
Yeah, so I guess the main one I was mentioned was Barracoon, which was, I'm in more into history a lot, so that was one of the ones that I really liked. And the other one on that same line is The Other Sons, which is talking about the Great Migration. So that's something we all read as part of discussion. I think it was 2 years ago for Black History Month. So I think that was another one that I would definitely recommend to check out, especially if you like history. And it's a long read. It's a kind of like a very large kind of textbook approach to the whole Great Migration. So a lot of cool information there.
Good. Ara?
Yeah, so Abby, can you check me on the latest Common Words and Music title?
Yes, you go ahead. I'll get you the other one.
All right. The other one was Evil Eye and Let My People Go Surfing.
Excellent. And I know you did Speaking Truth to Power through song and
stories
something.
And song, stories
Yes.
and song by Tom
Yes.
Morello. And the common one is Bluebird Memories, which is also, I mean, I got to see it live in the theater, which is so nostalgic right now, but the audio is amazing and you really should check it out. There's also Half Light by Tayari Jones, who some of you might remember from An American Marriage, and she's got a great work here. Proof of Love by Chisa Hutchinson, and In Love and Struggle.
Excellent. And I did The Color of Money, which I think everybody should read. And so for anybody who wants to learn more about what you guys are doing in the Black Employee Network and or your work with Newark, where can we find? I'll leave that up for either of you to talk about.
So great website, audible.com/about. And then on the content side, obviously audible.com, right, Abby?
Yes.
Excellent.
And I'm just gonna, I'll be the only one to say, feel free to reach out to me on social. I am happy to talk more and more about what we do because I'm super invested in it.
Me too. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Me as well.
Justin, LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn works great.
All right, excellent. I cannot wait to see you guys at AfroTech World. It's November. This has been Listening for a Change, Transforming Talk into Action. I sincerely appreciate you guys, Abby, Ara, and Justin. Had a great time talking with you guys, and I look forward to seeing my Audible credit pop in any day now. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Yes, yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Awesome.
Right,
Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.